And Brian Burns had like one of the weirder, not a holdout, it's a hold in. These young dudes love to get on Instagram and post the memes and try to understand what the sad Spider-Man in the rain means and all those types of things. He played, I think it was like an FU pay me mode with like the way that game started and what he disrupted. And he's going the rest of the way. I feel like he's actually going to earn some more money in contract negotiations based on how the Panthers are playing and how they need him on defense. So where do things stand based on what you're hearing with the Panthers and Brian Burns? Where are they on the scale?
Well, unfortunately, he doesn't have a great deal of leverage now. What leverage he did had, he sort of ceded. Mm-hmm. And look, we saw it with a Nick Bosa, and Brian Burns is not Nick Bosa. Brian Burns is a very good pass rusher. He's not Nick Bosa, but Bosa held out and he didn't show up to training camp and he wasn't fined, or his fines could be waived because he was on the rookie contract. Brian Burns, did show up. Then there was that weird sort of hold in / hold out. Mm-hmm. But then ultimately, once you start missing games, well, you lose out on $900,000. Essentially, that's the game check for Brian Burns. So that's a great incentive to get out there on the field. And then, you can sort of change your perspective and say, all right, look, the contract may or may not be coming, likely isn't coming at this point. So let's just go out there and make them regret this. The Panthers did not have a great deal of leverage early on because of the trade package that they turned down for Brian Burns last year. Let's recall at least 2 first-round picks. It was a deal that a number of teams, I think, would have made, but obviously the Panthers did not make that with the Rams. And so once you don't make that, Brian Burns holds leverage, except once the season starts and you're about to be out $1 million every single game, you start to lose that leverage. So at this point, I won't be surprised if Brian Burns plays out the season. I won't be surprised if Brian Burns plays out the season without a new contract. We could be right back here at this spot, 10-ish months from now with Brian Burns on the franchise tag and a whole slew of new problems for the Panthers and Burns.
Well, why are the Panthers hesitant to pay him? Confused.
Well, we're seeing it right now, and we saw it rather because Chris Jones just ended his holdout, where you have a team who says, okay, look, we really, really value you. We think that you're a top 5 player at your position. Mm-hmm. But then that player and his representation say, well, here's the top of the market. Right. Here's what Nick Bosa just signed for. Here's what Aaron Donald just signed for. So we want something close to that. We're not saying he's that. We want something close to that. And the team's like, oh, that's an outlier. We're not going close to that. We will put you in the top 4, but that doesn't mean that you're close to 1. And that's where you have the difference of legitimately $4 million or so a year. That's where you have the difference in a lot of guaranteed money. And that's where you're just not going to reach an agreement.
It's the mixed messaging makes no sense to me, right? Like, hey, we're not going to trade you for 2 1s, but we don't think you're worth. Like, just a weird one.
And it was sort of very predictable.
They have no one else on defense. Like
I know, and it was very predictable, right? Like where once you turn down that trade package, that you're going to have to pay him, and he knows, and his agent knows, and everybody knows. And now you're in the spot, and it's like, yeah, we're still not gonna pay you.
Okay. Look, I mean, if it was about rebuilding, and we saw it, it's just week 1 with the Carolina Panthers. It's just week 1. But I think we understand that maybe the optimism and the vibes and getting away from the Matt Rule stuff was in overabundance. And when we actually saw the guys that they put around Bryce Young, going, ooh, maybe they don't have the playmakers they thought they had from the jump. It was a very underwhelming performance against the Atlanta Falcons. They literally handed them that win. They don't believe in Desmond Ridder to throw the ball. I mean, J.C. Horn's out of the game, and they still wouldn't throw downfield. So that tells you what they think about Ridder. I don't want to overdo it with week 1, but I was really disappointed with the way that thing played out.
Yeah, I think that that's a fair feeling for a lot of Panthers fans right now. Look, there's of the 32 NFL teams, you're going to have about 27 that can complain about their offensive line. That's the state of the NFL right now. Defensive lines are ahead of offensive lines. Pass rushers are ahead of tackles. That's what it's going to be. And the Panthers, who have tried to rework that offensive line, you get Corbett back in there, you move around Brady Christensen, it should get better. But also Bryce Young has to complete those downfield throws on the shots that he finally does take, right? He missed Mingo. He missed Marshall. So we can talk about the offensive line because they were an issue in joint practices with the Jets. They were an issue at times in preseason, and Bryce seemed to be decent in spite of them. but he had some throws. He had receivers with steps, and Shark's not out there and Thielen's banged up, but he missed those throws. And then Frank Reich even said, we had 4 to 6, downfield plays dialed up, and we only went to 2 or 3 of them. Yeah. They're going to have to be better play calling. So you don't want to hit the football cliches of it's everybody's fault, but I don't think that Bryce Young should escape criticism because of his offensive line when, an overwhelming majority of the NFL has that issue, and a lot of quarterbacks were still able to be more successful on Sunday.
You were the first person to extrapolate correctly that the Panthers were going to take Bryce Young based on a question that you had asked Frank Reich. I ask you now here, not because of this one game, but I just ask you here on September 12th, 2023. Did the Panthers take the right quarterback with the first overall pick?
Yes, unequivocally. If you are taking, if you trade up to go to number 1 and you have to get a quarterback, Bryce Young is the quarterback to get. I don't really have many doubts about that. My issue or my thought process has always been, there have been a series of mistakes that have led you to needing to trade away a top tier number 1 wide receiver to then move up to get the number 1 pick for a quarterback.
The second round pick was a direct result of the McCaffrey trade.
Correct.
It was the primary chip from the McCaffrey trade. So.
And to get a quarterback for whom there is no historical comparison in terms of size. So you are projecting, and you have an incredible offensive staff with 200 years of experience there who, they know a lot of football, but they don't know how the 5'10", 180-something pound quarterback is going to do. Now, I do believe he was the best pick out of that draft, but that is the position you have left yourself in over the last 2 to 3 years because of poor decision-making from the top down and bad decisions on top of bad decisions. So to answer your question, Joe, he was the right call, but if you could turn back the hands of time, you probably don't want to be in that spot, and you didn't really have to be.
That's the thing. They didn't have to be. That's always been our big problem.
Yeah. We can't turn back the hands of time, but there's 2 things I'm definitely watching this year, Double J. I'm watching the Colts because they hired the younger coach who the Panthers could have hired. And then they took the quarterback who was the scratch off in Richardson. I'm watching the Bears too, because that could have been the tandem for the Panthers. That could have been Justin Fields throwing to DJ Moore. Well, and I'm not trying to dance on JC Horn's injured hamstring, but I still don't understand that pick to this day. And I don't think I ever will understand that pick.
Well, look, Anthony Richardson's going to take some time, and I don't think there's any doubt about that. In fact, the Colts basically just stare you straight in the face and say it's going to be a roller coaster.
Sure.
And they do, literally.
So is Josh Allen. Josh Allen's a roller coaster too, man.
He is. We felt that we were at the end of the ride, where you're going back into the hub. And
no.
But the other thing I'll say about Justin Fields and DJ Moore, that could have been in Carolina, no doubt. But what's happening right now in Chicago with Justin Fields, I don't know that he's going to have a great deal of runway beyond this season if things continue the way it has. Like,
gotcha.
I don't know.